Lovely. Hey, welcome everybody. It is absolutely lovely to be here once again with all of you. There's nothing greater than a teaching day. I wake up early, I get so much energy, really fun. So as most of you know, today we're going to work on the text Patterns, Habits, and Free Will and the practice of peeling the onion. No, it's not a cooking class. We have something else in mind by Venerable Tenzin Tharpa. And this is part of my Skillful Living series. I mentioned briefly before, I'd like to state it again, that we had a lot of requests to break this text up into two teachings because it is quite dense and really, really fascinating. It's one of my favorite topics and quite potentially the most important in all of Buddhism. And when we talk about peeling the onion here, we're talking about introspection. So that's kind of cool. Let's start off with our wonderful community prayer. Let us take a moment to appreciate our community gathered here today. For as the Buddha stated, community isn't an aspect of the path, it is the path. Today, I feel fortunate to sit as a member of this kind community in the safety and security of like-minded friends, sharing the present moment with others dedicated to the cultivation of goodness. Today, I'm grateful for the direction and support that this community provides, a community worthy of my time and commitment, a community where my efforts have meaning, purpose, and are appreciated. Today, I'm thankful for this community of awakening, a place to gain the knowledge and skills to improve my life, a family, a home, and a sanctuary for all of us seeking refuge from the storm. And welcome, storm goers. We're all here. So let's dig right into it and have some fun. My other friend also yelled at me. She said to me, "You're reading too much when you're teaching. Stop reading so much. We could all read the damn book ourselves." She has anger issues. uh, and I thought it was a pretty good idea. So I just have some couple bullet points. So when we talk about patterns and habits, I think most of us, of course, we think about the common ones. We think about smoking and diet and exercise and all the terrible things we have to pay attention to live to a ripe old age. But and those are kind of okay. But to me, I think they're a little boring. This subject really becomes interesting when you dig below those and you start to dig into the patterns and habits of personality and behavior. And then it becomes amazingly fascinating. And again, what we're talking about here is introspection. The practice of peeling the onion, which we'll be working on next Tuesday, is a practice of introspection. For those of you who aren't acquainted with the term, introspection is looking at yourself, understanding yourself, discerning qualities, inspecting, observing, all those good things, whatever vocabulary you want to use. But that's introspective. Looking into ourselves, learning about ourselves, figuring out ourselves. Why? So we can have better lives. It's that simple. Okay, so what this allows us is, this is the path to awakening. Um, as we're always talking about in these classes, we're always talking about, oh, awakening is the realization of your true nature and the true nature of reality. I must sound like a broken record saying that over and over again, but it's true, and that is the key thing. In Buddhism, we have all these practices, we have all these books, we have all these topics, but you know what? They could all be condensed down into that. And which of course means knowing yourself and your environment, how you operate, how reality operates. Once you know that, you're a master of the universe, right? You're like Thor. You become an Avenger. And when we talk about awakening, and we tend to always define it when we're here for any new people, awakening is another word for enlightenment or liberation, and it's freedom from mundane and habitual mental states. Mundane and habitual, we're talking about patterns, right? Mental afflictions and mistaken views. which are usually embodied in the form of patterns. So these are by far the most interesting of the patterns when you start digging into this level. But most of us live our lives with the presumption that we're in control of everything and we decide everything and everything is the distinct choice by me, and this whole thing I call life is moving forward in a pretty good direction because I'm in charge and I'm taking care of it. But reality is, when you start to dig into patterns and habits, the most interesting thing is realizing how much kind of is operating behind the scenes, right? Kind of operating like a form of autopilot. We're really not that aware of so much of what we do. And like the old adage says, we are truly creatures of habit. When you start digging deeper and deeper, and you start to realize certain qualities that you would surely believe are a part of your free will, are merely patterns like likes and dislikes and personality and things like that. Once you start realizing those are patterns, it becomes quite fascinating. So all kinds of our patterns are all kinds of reactions to our kind of automated responses to external and internal stimuli, as we talk about in the book. So the idea is most of us live our lives like in the state of autopilot, that we believe we're making conscious choices, but really these are just patterns of conditioning that arise and we simply follow them. So again, these patterns come from our social conditioning. We learn these patterns from our parents, from our siblings, from our peers. We learn these from media, from television, from movies, and we simply act them out. Most of our ideas about wonderful things like love and things were conditioned from all the media we see, to fall in love and be swept off our feet and all of that. This is all conditioning. Introspection is our way of looking into that and examining it. And we're examining it because we want to live better lives. We seem to have the idea that we can just stumble our way through life and find happiness. It's just like somebody's gonna show up at the door with a big bag of money and happiness arrives at your doorstep. But sorry to give you guys bad news, but it usually doesn't work that way. Happiness is something that we cultivate. Happiness arises when you live life well. And so we begin to live life well by understanding ourselves and our environment, how the whole thing functions, and develop skills for working with that. And of course, this whole series is called Skillful Living. That was my main idea behind this project that I'm working on here with this YouTube and classes, was simply to give people some good tools to help them develop the tools so they can get the results. To me, the whole spiritual path is really simple algebra. Introspection is the tool we're going to be using. Introspection is shedding the light of day onto our daily workings. It's uncovering all these things that we didn't really know was happening. So when we get around to introspection, it's just like we all got our own little flashlights. And your job is to shine that flashlight into all the corners of your brain you haven't looked at before. And most of them are lovely, but there's a few that can be a little frightening, maybe, when you first look into some qualities. But everything needs that sunlight. Everything you need to shine some daylight into all those things to help transcend them and to get beyond those, to get out and through. Okay, so when we talk about patterns, there's so many patterns. You start this practice of introspection and you start at the beginning and you look at behavior that you do and things like that, but especially the thought process, especially internal habits. internal phenomena, thoughts, intentions, emotions, moods, watching your reactions, watching your behaviors. This is where it starts to become really, really exciting. And at some point, you get to the really deepest levels. So the idea of peeling the onion and that lovely terminology, it's a strange phrase for a spiritual path. But the idea is that we keep peeling the onion layer upon layer, and each layer is a bit of untruth about ourselves, things that we might have understood incorrectly or views that we had about ourselves that we find are not quite accurate. We keep peeling those away with the hope of finding the yummy truth in the middle of the whole thing. So that's why we use the term peeling the onion. Peeling the apple just didn't work. There's only one layer. You just get the skin and the but you know, the onion, you got layers upon layers upon layers. So the most interesting out of all of this is when we get into patterns of view. So this is what really changes us. So this is what we're shooting for in Buddhism. We're shooting for right view. It's the first of the Eightfold Path. And again, it relates to the correct view of your existence and yourself. That is right view. And view itself is a pattern, and it, of course, I think it's an obvious one. You know, if you're born a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew, those religious backgrounds give you a model of reality. You know, they tell you, oh, there's a good guy up here, there's a bad guy up here, here's our role in the middle. They give you an ontological model of reality. And so Buddhism equally offers its own view, which we've talked about in the past. And when you start to look at your view, you realize that even your view of reality, your perspective, is nothing more than a habit, a pattern that you've gotten. So all of these are malleable. So in one sense, maybe it's a little disconcerting because you feel like you're kind of removing a lot of the things that you felt like grounded you, that felt like a safety net. But so there is an aspect that takes a little courage. You got to be brave. But the other aspect is, who wants if it's not true? You know, does anybody there? Do you guys want any views, any intentions and stuff that aren't true? You know, for myself, that's always been my path in Buddhism, was the search for truth. So that's what we're going to get to. And then it comes down to right view and wrong view. So right view for a Buddhist is the view of the Buddha, which means the Four Noble Truths and all of those, the Buddhist view of reality. And then wrong views are just all the others that don't seem to bring us happiness and contentment and all the things we're looking for. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to look at ourselves and start peeling away all the untruth. There was a great philosopher, and he wasn't a Buddhist, but that's what he liked about Buddhism. He thought that Buddhism was a radical form of deconstruction, that the whole practice of Buddhism is just removing untruth from our lives. And they're unburdening us. It's like a heavy weight is removed, and then you can just shine, right? It's lovely. So that incorporates all of our practices. Patterns, I think of patterns as we think of patterns as being neural pathways in our brains. I think of patterns defined as relationships, the reoccurring instances of thoughts, intentions, behaviors, and experiences. But patterns can be relationships between anything. You know, they could be your relation to external objects like chocolate cake and ice cream in my case, you know, or it can be, you know, work or money or whatever. But patterns are having to do with those and how we go about getting them and our behaviors related to those. So, and then on top of it all, most of our traits, emotions, and personalities are nothing but habits when you really look at them all. Of course, we have a lot of traits that are more positive and productive than others. And what we do with introspection is we learn about this stuff. We shine our flashlights of awareness onto them. We learn about them and we decide for ourselves with free choice what's productive and what's not, what's skillful and what's not, what makes my life better, and we're here to rip out and throw away all that junk that doesn't make our lives better. Enough with you, we throw it away. So that's what we're going to be doing here in introspection. Oh, is that great? So before the next one we're going to talk about is free will, but I'd like to take a little break right now and take some questions. What do you guys got for me? Let's ask some questions about patterns and habits. I can't necessarily see everybody so well, so you don't have to raise your hand. You could just yell. Oh, Stephen made it. Good to see you, Stephen. You could just scream. And most of you are muted, so remember to unmute yourself to ask something. Fascinating subject of patterns. What do you guys think of patterns?
What's a good way to identify, like to how can I say it? To yeah, pretty much to identify, like to remember anything like that. I'm not exactly sure. When it happens, how do you, like, it's hard to explain. I'm sorry.
No, that was perfect, and I understand completely. That's where we're going to talk about that a little later today, and especially next week. That's where the practice comes in, and the practice is step by step how you do it. But in a lot of ways, to give you an answer now, it's just a matter of being more aware of your actions. You know, letting less be automatic. So when you do things, you develop this alert, this watchful. What's the word I use? Watchful. I can't remember the word I use. I was just writing about it. Yeah, you develop a watchfulness, and this watchfulness allows you to be more aware of all the things you do, and you just notice. It's actually the practice is quite simple. It's a practice you're already doing. We all do it. This is just putting it in more of a formal context and allowing you to do it a lot better, a lot more skillful. So don't worry, we're going to get to that.
Yeah, I have a question.
Good question, please.
I found out the change because I was so for whatever it is. That's not have put it right. I want to change that. So I don't like that the environment or circumstance in what I have. And I was fighting with no succeed, because when it did happen in other circumstances, I just thought, wow, but I promised myself to change it. I couldn't.
Sure.
You know what you do? You know, awareness, the change. I think is, the problem is if you're suffering, you want to change it, right? Or wherever habit, is it internal? Habit, or it's like outside habit, but internal habit, the change is so hard, right? If you suffer from it, you want to change it, and the question is it any possibility, or?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a great question.
Thank
so she was the audio was a little tough to understand, but the question was about change, and that some qualities of habit and things are easy to change and some aren't. Some internal ones just seem to be so embedded. You know, some seem just impossible to change. And the answer is all of the above. Chances are there's some qualities in all of us that maybe we'll keep all the way to our deathbeds. Who knows? But the idea is we can improve. We can all improve. Yes, some changes, some habits and patterns and changes are more difficult than others. And that changes for each one of us. You know, for me, it seems like dietary changes are a little difficult for me to carry on with. But to other people, it might be alcohol, which is easy for me. I don't drink. So those are all different for each one of us. So you have to accept that. But I do believe no matter what they are, you can gain some kind of gradual improvement. Even a pattern that you might take all the way to the grave, you can get to a point where it doesn't affect you so much. And of course, this comes in with a lot of the topics we talk about, like objective distance and learning how to be less reactionary. You know, if you can stop it before it kind of gets in, then that's an easy way to remedy just about anything. But yeah, I believe you can make headway on just about any kind of pattern or some. But boy, some could be really difficult. Yeah, good question.
I talked here about that reaction on things, how to change that reaction on things. That
Well,
is the
that's the
main.
same. That reaction is a pattern. Reactions are patterns. They don't
And yeah,
seem to be,
exactly
but they
how to
are.
change.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna talk about that next week in the practice section, and also
Yeah.
today. Later on, we're gonna talk about a couple techniques for working with it. So hang in there. I have some techniques to share with you about that. But you know, we also change them kind of on the slow side, and some of them take a while. Some of our patterns and habits have been habituated over a very, very long time. But others you can do pretty quick. And the good news is that nobody ever talks about is the more you practice, the better you get at it. So what something seems like, oh, that's going to take me forever to master it. But day to day, you get better and better at the skill. And guess what? You change better. Like now, it seems like I can work with patterns really quickly, where it used to take me forever to change a pattern. So there's hope out there. Don't you worry. Another question. Yeah, I'm waiting for you, Carl. I see his thinking caps on. Pulling down his thinking cap. You got a question, Carl? Anything you want to share? You don't have to. Stephen?
No, not right this second. No,
Because you know
I'm with
everything.
you.
You're a damn
Yes,
know-it-all.
that's exactly what it is.
Those smart students, they're the pain in the butt. Yeah. Hey, that's great. You guys want to carry on? Yay! Yeah, let's carry on. Okay, so now we're going to get to the juicy, yummy part. We're going to talk about some free will. And free will is the great stuff. So nowadays, as you all know, many of you might know if you're on YouTube and you're interested in the mind and psychology, there's so much of a debate nowadays about free will, whether we have it, whether we don't. And it's been going on for a long time. Buddhism favors free will. We're on the side of free will. And this is contentious also because in early Buddhist scriptures, some places talk about with the Buddhists saying that there's no agent. What we talk about agent is we talk about someone at the wheel of the car, an agent, the person who chooses all the things we do. That's called the agent. There's one, actually it's only one sutra where they refer to the idea that there's no agent, but then all of Buddhism in other senses always seems to imply that. The Buddha talks about the idea of no self, but he's talking about a certain type of self. And I don't think he's ever talking about that we don't have will, because his teachings are all based on the idea. Karma is based on the idea that you can observe and change your patterns and habits. You can change the way you do things and improve your karma and live a better life. That itself is just embodied right in free will. So let's define free will. Free will is one's ability to make deliberate, intentional choices. So in this, I talk about that although we're all kind of sure we have it, and nobody really doubts it except for the philosophers, reality is that most people use very little of it. So when we have this question, do we or don't we have free will? Here I say yes in the article, but I think to be more appropriate, I would have to say the answer is that we have the capacity for free will. So I think for Buddhism, that would be the proper answer, that we all have the capacity for free will. Because a great deal of us just apply none at all in our daily lives. Many of you probably know instances in your own life or friends who just live life on autopilot. You know, you go to work, you come home, you make dinner for the kids, you watch your favorite show, you wake up, you do it all again. And there's nothing bad, or we're not trying to blame anybody for anything. It's just these ruts that we fall into. And they can be comfortable. You know, when you have a pattern, there's not a lot of thinking that goes on. You know what time you get off work. You have 12 different dishes that you can choose to make the kids for dinner that night. You got your favorites. Your favorite show is there. A lot of people find great comfort in that. But I think the spiritual path is actually the attainment of more and more free will, the cultivation of free will. I think in most cases, in my own opinion, I think children have almost no free will at all. I think when we first become self-aware is when we first come into having true free will. Children are truly creatures of habits. You know, their actions might look unique and spontaneous, but I think they're just, a big grouping of all the things they've seen people do around them and answers and things they've heard, and they mix them all together and they kind of react. But Buddhism does apply and support the idea of free will. And again, I think all of these practices, when we talk about awakening, we're talking about awakening from mundane, habitual existence. And that means awakening from our patterns and habits. Our patterns and habits aren't a negative thing. We want to make sure that we get that they're very useful, and it's the way we interact with our world. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. The problem is when we're unaware of it, sometimes it becomes problematic. When we depend more and more on habits and patterns, we move further and further away from honest existence, in a genuine existence in which we're really aware of the things around us. Patterns and habits, they lull us into a state of numbness and dullness. And of course, in Buddhism, we call that state samsara. And samsara really is this state of habitual patterns and habits, especially that of view, so the view of how we see ourselves. So in Buddhism, this is what we're trying to get away from. We're looking for mental freedom. And mental freedom from what? Patterns. Patterns of fear, patterns of distrust, patterns of self-abuse, patterns of lack of confidence in ourselves, patterns of emotion, of behavior, of the way we lash out at people, patterns of reactivity. All these mental attributes that we just don't have any control over. And once you gain control over them, ooh la la, life gets better. Isn't that cool? Okay. So any questions about free will? That's quite a topic. Maybe we want to take a break there. What do you guys think about free will? Our philosopher might have something to say about that. We have a philosophy professor among us. What do you think, Stephen? You're on mute, Stephen. Can you unmute yourself so we can hear your lovely voice?
Well, I appreciated the point you made in the video, the text, that it isn't do people have free will or not, but it's how much do you have. And I think that's where the focus ought to be, instead of some big theoretical claim, yes, we do, no, we don't. Just to wake up in the morning and say, oh, I don't have too much today. Or, oh, I can do a lot today. You know, now that shows us something from our own experience. So that's the point that I really thought was crucial in what you wrote.
Lovely. And Yeah, again, I thought the same idea. That's where this idea that we have the capacity for free will is a nice starting point. And yeah, so much we get caught up in binary. We get caught up in binary. It's either this or that. There's never a middle ground, and that's not the case here. The case here is that we have capacity for it. And what you do is you wake up in the morning and you say, how awakened do I want to be today? How clear and focused I am. When we talked about our last subject of appreciation, this is a great topic, and it fits into here in a way you might not be aware of. That when we talk about the practice of appreciation, we often think about it as just being, happy and positive. But again, what it's really about is objectivity and clarity. And again, that's cutting through those patterns, so that aspect of not having any appreciation for all the things in our lives. This is samsara. These are the patterns we're talking about. We get in a pattern of being dull, a pattern of seeing things with dull eyes. We don't see the flowers we walk by every day to work. These are patterns. All of the stuff we're working with in one way or another really come down to patterns. Thank you, Stephen.
I got a question.
Yes, Mert.
So are you saying that free will is correlated with awareness?
Oh, very much so.
But we also have a limit. Like, we can't be aware of everything.
Well said. That's right. Yeah. So in the book it talks about, and I like the argument that we combine the two apparatuses, those two mechanisms. We don't get rid of patterns and habits. That's how we operate. This is an amazing system. We don't want to have the idea that there's something wrong with patterns and habits. This is an amazing system we use. It helps us to utilize all this information. But as we draw from these habits and patterns, the pools of these, free will is that last minute where there's a glimmer of awareness there that can see over them and can stop a pattern that maybe was looking like it was going forward, but we have a little awareness that says, no, this isn't the appropriate time for that, or no, we've decided that this is now an unskillful habit and we're going to not apply it. So we don't have to be aware of everything around us. And you're exactly right. It's always just a question of gaining more free will. I don't believe in absolutes in any sense. Well, that was an absolute statement. But I absolutely don't believe in absolutes. But I agree with you that no, we don't posit an absolute. The idea is improvement, is gaining a little bit more free will. And I think the more free will we gain, the better our lives become.
Okay, and you also talked about moving things from autopilot and taking them into our conscious mind. But let's take walking as an example. When you're walking, you don't think about your muscles, like you don't think about which foot you put in front, and it's just automatic.
Yeah.
So from what you say, I think what I understand is it's more about being conscious about your habits. So you pick which habits you want to keep, but a lot of the habits we have, they are just there and we don't even realize that they're there.
You're exactly right. And our awareness also has another tricky thing. We can only be aware of one thing at a time. That's the nature of the brain. Our senses can work in tandem. We can watch and hear a movie at the same time, but we can only be aware of one thing at a time. So exactly, we can't be aware of everything. So in these practices, you kind of choose it. You do a little multitasking. You can move that awareness back and forth. But we do practices that are meant to work with these, like walking mindfulness, walking meditation is a very popular practice in which we focus on walking and to gain more awareness. And what we're really trying to shoot for is how to remain present in the present moment, and we use activity to do that. And in walking meditation, at some points at the beginning, it gets a little funny because you start it and you all of a sudden, when you bring that awareness to it, you realize, well, I don't really know how I walk. And then you start walking, and it feels funny, and you're not sure what to do with your back. And how did I used to do this? And you're walking, and then you start to realize, well, there's dozens of different ways to walk. I can, walk with my back straight or the side, or I can walk with this stride or that stride. But eventually, it all kind of goes away. But it's quite a fun exploration. But you're right, and that's what we do. We bring that awareness, that introspection, into our lives, into all kinds of stuff we do. How do I eat, and how do I do this, and how did I do that? But those might seem silly. Some are really important. How do I communicate to others? Now that's a big one. When you're more aware of how much space you're taking up, and are you letting other people get in the conversation? That's a powerful one that could be so beneficial, and then parenting skills, when you bring mindfulness to that, and you're not just acting out of habit, there's some real awareness and real wisdom going on. So yeah, cool. Good question. He's a smart guy, isn't he? That Martha. Kind of handsome too, I think. Those Turks. Any other questions? How are we doing on time? Let's keep rolling on then, if nobody has any questions. You can ask anything. You can ask about my beauty regimen or my dietary habits, my diet plan. Hey, let's get into drives and intentions. Our next one, now that Alberto is back with his glass of water. We wouldn't start without you, my great Tuscany friend. He's the greatest. He does a music therapy thing, working with kids, and just the biggest heart anybody ever met. Okay, so behind our patterns are our drives and intentions. Here we get into the nitty-gritty stuff. And now this is just such a world of drives. Man, there are so many drives. I list quite a few here, but it's just endless, from our animalistic drives of hunger and thirst and procreation to just some of our petty drives, of competition and needing to be better than others, or needing to be important, needing to be visible, needing to be important, like in a group that people are talking to you. There's so many drives that we have. I think some of the more interesting ones are, if I can find them here. Some of the nice ones here. We got, the physical activity. The body's need to move. I always thought that was quite fascinating. We're all aware of this, right? I have friends that they cannot sit in a chair and talk for very long. Okay, it's time to go for a walk, or it's time to work in the backyard, and they're just drawn to motion. I am the opposite of that. I always say it's time to sit down and sit in a chair. But there's so many great ones, like curiosity, the drive for curiosity, the drive for mental and physical well-being. There's lovely ideas there. So again, none of these guys are bad guys. Our patterns and our habits, our drives, this is the way we operate, and it's an extraordinary mechanism. We're just trying to gain a bit of control over it. When it operates by itself, it lacks wisdom. It does a lot of stupid stuff that we don't really want it to do. At least mine does. Mine tends to make a lot of choices that I could make better choices if I was a little bit more aware. So, but drives are kind of behind our free will. There are our primordial impulses, as they like to call them. And again, this is more like these pools of patterns and habits. Drives can be patterns as well, that we operate from. Free will would be the master that sits on top and decides what carries on and what doesn't. It's that guy that's the safety net, and he stops you from doing absurd things that'll embarrass you for the rest of your life. And of course, then we get into an intention. So our drives are very deep, and oftentimes those are subconscious. They're from our animal nature. They're primordial, but they tend not to have any kind of moral value. You can do them for a lot of different reasons. Some of them clearly are, greed, hatred, envy. These are drives that just have no benefit at all. There's nothing to be found there. But other ones like anger, which can be a drive as far as vengeance goes, or it can be an emotion. Anger can be used for good. You could get good results from anger in the face of injustice, or if someone's hurting someone you love. Anger can help you to act in an appropriate way and to stop that from happening. So, but what really holds the wheel when we're talking about our goodness and our merits of our actions, it's intention. Intention is the reasons behind the things you do. It's the mind's thought that, in this case, this is an appropriate action. So in Buddhism, we work with intention more than anything. In fact, it's quite an interesting aspect that from Theravada Buddhism, the first and earliest Buddhism, there was a great shift in the Mahayana, and the shift was from the focus on action to the focus on intention. So for monk vows or lay people's vows in the Theravada tradition, the Pali tradition, everything is primarily action-based. But when you get into the Mahayana vows and the Bodhisattva and the Mahayana vehicle, everything switches to intention. Again, because intention is really where the merits of our actions are found. The Buddha himself actually redefines karma. In ancient India, in Brahmanism and Jainism, action, karma was always defined as action. The Buddha redefines it as intention, or intentional action, or volition, your choice of lovely vocabulary there. That intention also isn't just a safety gate. It's also the quality in which you approach things, the quality in which you apply your skills. That's intention. If you're a great woodworker, you can have the intention at a moment to just do a great job on something, or do a mediocre job on something, depending on your mood. So generally in Buddhism, we work on intention more than anything else. Okay, any questions about that? And I think we're going through time pretty quick, so I'm going to keep going. The next section is working on our patterns and habits. So next week, we're going to talk about peeling the onion. But today, I'd like to talk about just a few techniques on a more broader scale about working with patterns and habits. The first one that's really important is that phenomena and stimuli is rarely are the problems we have in life. We tend to think it is. If I could only get this or get rid of something, I'll feel better. But what it actually is, it's our relationship to phenomena where most of our suffering comes from. And that could be internal or external. Internal being thoughts, intentions, desires, choices. It's a relationship to our thoughts, intentions, desires, and choices, which gives us suffering or pleasure. So with that said, all phenomena is ethically ambiguous. A gun can be used to protect, or a gun can be used to kill. Money can be used to build hospitals. Money can be used to build war. It's our intentions that are behind everything that dictate that, and it's our relationship to it. So the problem is our relationship to money is where the problems come in. It's not money itself. There's nothing wrong with getting a big bag of money. If I found one today, I'd be a happier monk. I would probably spend it differently than some of you. But I would be happier because it's resources, it's opportunity. If I found a big bag of money, I could help people, and I could build a Dharma center, and maybe eat 3 times a day, which would be a luxury, and things like that. So, you know, money's not a problem. Your phone is not a problem. It's your relationship to your phone. Everybody at teachings holds up their phones. What do we do about these phones? They're ruining the world. I say, oh, stop your belly aching. You got the greatest piece of technology ever invented. You just have to learn how to use it. Don't go on Facebook. Go on YouTube and watch videos of the Dalai Lama. You'll feel you'll feel better. A topic that we talked a little bit about yesterday that Carl chimed in on was the idea of transcendence and not suppression. This is really important, right? So I remember when I was, you know, when we're kids, I think adults always just want us to suppress emotions. You know, boys shouldn't cry, and we're supposed to just put up with it. When we get older, we get into therapy, they turn it around on us. They say, oh, you shouldn't suppress any emotions. You should let them out, which led to some really strange therapy in the 70s and 80s. We were talking about this what did they call it, Carl? That rage therapy or something? It was really funny. People would go out.
Primal scream, yeah.
And people
primal scream therapy. Yeah.
And they go out to the woods and scream at trees and stuff. And the idea was, you need to get that anger out. You need to exercise it. To be honest, I don't know which one's right, but in Buddhism, we don't believe in either. The Dalai Lama believes that the idea is that emotions are patterns and habits. And what happens is when you exercise them, oftentimes you just reinforce them. So in Buddhism, often we're looking for antidotes. We're looking for, we like to dig at the root of things. We're looking for antidotes so that anger doesn't necessarily arise in a negative way as it did. As human beings, anger arises. The Dalai Lama says that he's angry sometimes, which I'm guessing he means irritable. I still feel it. I never have a goal of not being angry. I think that that's kind of silly. Certainly, I can think of 100 different scenarios in which anger is the appropriate response, and I would hope I would respond in that way. But we're trying again to gain control over these things. We want to learn how to respond appropriately at an appropriate level. So that's what we're trying to work on. And how do you do that? You do with introspection. You look at your anger. When anger arises, you look at it, you become aware of it. And we're going to get into some methods on how to do that. One of the methods is understanding. So to me, understanding is just the one and only thing. Boy, it's just the answer to everything. You know, if you have a fear, if you have a problem, whatever it is, once you understand the mechanism of it, your suffering is reduced. It's as simple as that. You're afraid of snakes, read a book on snakes, buy a pet snake. You know, that's really how it's done. And that's what we do in Buddhism. Buddhism likes to call it wisdom, insight. To me, wisdom sounds like a word for privileged people. I like just to use the word understanding because it just seems like real everyday understanding, in my case anyways. That's really helping me to be a more happy person. So the idea is, again, that understanding is part of that awareness. And that's our flashlight. We take that flashlight and we shine it at the stuff we're investigating. And first awareness hits it, and then through that awareness, we get some insight and we get some understanding. And at some point, you feel like you can work with it a little bit, then you could set it aside and start working on another area. So, yeah. And in Buddhism, oftentimes the mechanism for understanding is what they call the 3 great objectives: study, contemplation, and meditation. Study pretty easy. Buy some books, listen to some teachings, listen to Tenzin Tharpa's audio files. Contemplation is just after you read a book, get a cup of coffee, sit in a chair, think about what it is, try to make some sense of it. And then once you feel like you have your mind kind of around it, if you can take it to the cushion and meditate on it in insight meditation, that great calmness that you gain through meditation brings amazing clarity to something. So that's the thing we're shooting for. And then next week, we're going to actually get into the practice of peeling the onion, which is a lot more precise. And I'll teach you exactly how to go about it. Oh, that was lovely. And we're doing pretty good on time. Any questions? I have some memes to share with everybody. Everybody liked them so much the other day. They said, we want more pictures. Enough of your yapping. We want, we want meaningful pictures instead of you. Should I be insulted by that, Carl? I am a giant meme. Look at the size of me. You could just print something across my forehead and post it on YouTube.
You could get like sponsors.
Oh,
Like,
I like
like,
your.
like,
I
like
like
a
your.
like a race driver's uniform. You could have.
Oh,
all
or
your
maybe
different
just
sponsors on
I teach for food.
it.
Maybe that's all I need. So, Miss Karen, you've
Problem
been
if
awful
I do
quiet.
that, it's just going to be Michelin.
Miss Karen has been awful quiet, and she's the one that said, "Oh, this material is so dense. We need to do like 50 classes. I have so many questions." But she's blacked out. I don't even think she's there. I think she's in the kitchen making a sandwich. Ah, good to see everyone. Okay, on to the pictures. And you know, short and sweet is good. It's good for the video and everything else. Let me share something with you folks. So, of course, what we're talking about, the West is known for ages. Know thyself. That's what we're talking about with pattern, habits, and free will and introspection. It's figuring ourselves out. This is, of course, with Socrates. This was above the great temple or whatever, the antiquity. And to this day, I think you can't beat it. That really does seem to be the beginning to all of it. And then we go a little further. Aristotle, a century or two later, says, knowing yourself is the beginning of wisdom. And Buddhism would really agree with this one. I think I'm getting thumbs up from my philosophy professor. You picked some good ones, Tharpa. Those are some good ones. Oh, my teacher, who just had a birthday yesterday. Did everybody know that? 85, right, Carl? Yeah, that's a lot of age. Oh, so the Dalai Lama says to foster inner awareness, introspection and reasoning is more effective than meditation and prayer. Now, this one's a little bit complicated. Does anybody see the complication with this? Is it just me?
Well, because you need meditation for this, don't you?
You're brilliant.
That's what I thought.
You want to teach the class? That was wonderful. Yeah, it works. I think I understand. I think he's talking about it in a very general way. He's talking about, like when we talk about introspection and reasoning, he's talking about insight meditation instead of calm abiding meditation and simple devotional prayers. So, but you're exactly right. Meditation is one of the great tools for introspection. But actually, both kinds of meditation work well. But just to sit on your cushion and veg out in calm abiding and nothing else, I think that's what he's implying here, that your time could be spent a little better if you engage the mind and start to look inside yourself and using reason and logic. It's much more helpful. And the other one is that he talks about prayer. In our group, we have prayers, but our prayers aren't really prayers. They're aspirations and affirmations. We're not praying to a deity to come and help us all. You know, Manjushri, make us all smarter. Ours are our aspiration affirmations of encouragement and direction, and they remind us of our prayers. So they're actually practices of introspection and reasoning. Yeah, I thought that was quite fascinating. And I like this one. And because this is Nurbu, right, from the Prime Minister of India. Life is like a game of cards. The hand you are dealt is determinism. The way you play it is free will. I thought this was fascinating. Buddhism would change it. We don't believe in determinism, we believe in cause and effect. The difference is cause and effect is potentiality, where determinism is not. Determinism is, I think in some ways it's similar because it does embrace the idea because of causes and conditions, certain things are bound to happen. But in a loose sense, I think as we use the word cause and effect, we use it in a more potential way, that we have a lot more choice over that those things can be really changed. Stephen, you got any answers, any thoughts on this one?
No, I like that game of cards because, you know, the other day we were moving between two extremes, that we're condemned to be free, and yet I was not free to be born into this country, to these parents, with this economic situation. But it's a good way to do justice to both of them. I didn't know this quote.
Yeah, I thought it was quite nice. Here's a very funny one. I have noticed even people who claim everything is predestined and that we can do nothing to change it. Sorry about that. They all look before they cross the road. I thought that was so funny. Isn't it true? Could you imagine going to an anti-free will conference where all the people are up there on stage, giving their proof that free will doesn't exist and everything is predestined, and then you watch them all come out of the building and head for their cars. I thought that was great. Stephen Hawkins. We got another one by His Holiness. According to Buddhism, individuals are masters of their own destiny, and all living beings are believed to possess the nature of the primordial Buddha Samattabhadra, the potential or seat of enlightenment within them. So our future is in our own hands. What greater free will do we need? I'm not reading very well today. I'd like to let everybody know when they talk about the nature of the primordial Buddha Samattabhadra, the primordial seat of enlightenment, that means Buddha nature. So that would be a little shorter. And Buddha nature means we all have the potential to become Buddhas. Not that some people say that we're Buddhas already and all we have to do is uncover that. But the idea is that once you're a Buddha, you can't fall back into wrong views. So clearly, we've never been Buddhas in the past. So it's the potential to be a Buddha. But I found this quote because even in Buddhism, people are debating whether free will is there or not. So I thought this was a nice quote by His Holiness to set the record straight. Oh, any questions, comments? You like that?
Yes, I got a question about what you last said.
Yes.
So you said when you achieve the state of Buddha, you don't fall into false views. So does that mean not making any mistakes?
It depends on if you're looking at the traditional version or more progressive version. The traditional view by the major traditions, they paint the Buddha as an absolute pure being that knows everything and can make any mistakes, purified in every sense of the word, not able to make any kind of mistake in any way. In fact, he's so pure, he doesn't even have intention, which almost sounds like he's even beyond free will, that everything just emanates from him perfectly in the perfect way. But progressive teachers like myself and others don't believe in any kind of an absolute idea like that the Buddha was a man And but with me, I stay away from the absolutes. It means being better, improvement, making less mistakes. I don't necessarily believe in the idea of Buddha nature, I don't think. I think all beings have the potential of awakening. To me, I see awakening as just evolutionary. We have an evolutionary spectrum of ignorance at one end and awakening on the other, and we navigate it the best we can. We're all moving, whether we like it or not, we're all moving towards that awakening part. That's the human species evolving. So there you go.
I guess if we had infinitely long lives, we could achieve the first state, but given our it's possible. Like, you can always be better, but there's no limit.
Yeah, and of course, Buddhism believes in rebirth. So the good karma or merit that you gain, you can keep evolving. That life stream can keep evolving, even though they're different people on each lifetime. But I've always believed that. I always believe that we have unlimited potential. And people say, I don't believe that. And I say, it's just a matter of fact that you're going to be sitting on your deathbed, and there's going to be potential that you never got to. And I think that's just true for every single one of us. Even if you're Bill Gates, who invented all this stuff and made all this money, he'll sit on his deathbed, and there's potential there that he didn't tap into. I'm an optimist. I'm a dreamer. Good question. Thank you. Okay, on to the next. Hey, I got one here by Albert Einstein. What a picture. Look at that guy. Kind of the opposite of me, isn't he? All that hair, and I'm bald as an egg. This one isn't about our topic today. This one is more about our practice of appreciation. I found it, and I wanted to share it, and I'm allowed to. I'm the teacher. So there are only two ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle, and the other is as though everything is a miracle. And I think it's a poetic term. I don't believe he really thinks there's only two. And of course, it's always a mix of the two, right? Many of us won't appreciate the food on our table, but we'll go to church on Sundays. And so I think we mix the two up. But the practice of appreciation is related to this, is that, really seeing the miracle in everything, seeing life fresh and new every day. You open your eyes and look, and stop taking for granted all the wonders in our world. Isn't that lovely? Oh, by the way, Albert Einstein was not a proponent of free will. Did you know that? He did not believe in free will. He thought we were just monkeys doing the same stuff every day. Oh, how could that brilliant guy disagree with me? Yeah. Hey, I think that brings us to the end of our teaching. We'll have some time for questions and answers. We're just right at there, about an hour. I'm getting better at this stuff. I'm becoming a human clock. Yeah. And was the topic thrilling and exciting and fascinating for you, as it is for me? Oh, good. I got some thumbs up. Yeah, again, I'd like to say that all in all the different things we're studying, this one here is really at the heart of Buddhism. This is it. This is discovering how we work, man. You don't have to worry about deities and ghosts and gods and all this stuff. This is just about figuring you out, how you work in your environment, how reality works, and then getting some skills to make all that work better, right? The very first thing we do in any situation is we figure out something, then we pick the skills for it, develop those skills, get the results. And we're hungry for those results, aren't we? My one and only greed is I want results of my damn meditation. I'm sick of sitting on that damn cushion all day long. I want to see some action, or I'm going to quit. Send a resignation letter to the Dalai Lama. My bottom's sore. I quit.
Serenity now.
This stuff ain't working. With that said, I'm just joking. What I found is that, man, this stuff works. You know, the stuff I'm teaching are my own practices, and I think I've cut my suffering in half, you know, and just every day's better. I gain more control over my world and myself, which is controls freedom, and it just gets better and better. It's great stuff, you know. And please offer some thoughts, and when we're done, we'll say our parting prayer. I'd like to remind everybody we're here. We do a Q&A on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at the same time at 2 o'clock Dublin time. And it's a whole lot of fun. And please come and ask questions and join us. Love to have you.
I have a question.
Please.
First of all, thank you. And what were your sources for that text? Because I really liked it.
Thank you. You know, my first text leaving the monastery was called Tibetan Buddhist Essentials. It was the closest I did to an academic piece, and I wrote that in an academic way. But since then, I really choose to let go of that and just teach people in a common way. So I tend not to weigh down all the text with notes and the sources for everything. I like to try to keep the text short and sweet, mostly because my friends are very lazy and they all hate to read. So I have to write texts that are short enough that they can get through in a few minutes. But these come from so many different sources. But when we talk about patterns and habits, these are in Mind and Mental Factors, which is a part of Buddhist philosophy. For a more traditional view, you can look at Tibetan Buddhist Essentials Volume 2, and I have a lot of the source material there. But it comes from all kinds of different places, all kind of put together. But Mind and Mental Factors has a lot to do with what we were talking about today. Free will isn't addressed in a direct way. The Buddha didn't mention it. It's always just been assumed. Certain things in Tibetan Buddhism is just a starting point, you know. The other one was when we were talking about the meaning of life. When I talked to my teachers and I asked them the meaning of life, they would say, oh, it's to be compassionate and help people, which is the purpose of life. But then when I said, no, the question means, why do we exist instead of not exist? I thought their eyes would just pop out of their heads. They never even thought of such a thing. So their philosophy starts, you know, just a step ahead of that. They don't go that fast. They assume that. They assume free will. So a lot of that is there, but yeah. Lati Rinpoche's book on mind and Tibetan Buddhism, which I sent Stephen a copy, that has a great deal of this in it. But it's just kind of throughout the teachings, I pull them all together.
Yeah. You know,
That's
Western ideas may not be valid ideas. If the Buddha never used the word free will, it might be that's really not the issue. There's better ways to come at the issue. And don't take Western philosophy so dead serious.
Well, you definitely have pegged the Buddha. That's exactly what the Buddha was about. Stop thinking so much and start practicing. Now, that doesn't say the Buddha was anti-intellectual. He gives some very deep questions, but he knows that middle way between the two, having enough knowledge and having too much knowledge. And then you also point out another thing, that as much as all of the traditions like to say that the Buddhist teachings are perfect and there's no problems, of course he's treated like a deity, in reality, when you study all the different traditions side by side, you really can't say that. There's great ambiguity between all the things, and there's a lot of things that weren't talked about, and so it's open to interpretation. We should all loosen up and have an open feeling about it, And I tend to, if you notice, I never talk about this is how the world is. I say, according to Buddhism or according to Theravada, because we really don't have the authority to say what the Buddha really said.
Nothing was written. I mean, that's very normal, isn't it?
Yeah, 500 years before Christ. But there was writing from that time. Brahmanism, which was ancient Hinduism, they had some writing. But most people didn't, and most people didn't read or write, and the Buddha didn't. So it was all oral. And of course, that's why they chanted. That was their way of recording.
So the works with regard to mind, they're called Abhidharma, isn't it? That's your work based on Abhidharma.
It is. The Abhidharma teachings, the Abhidharma is the first attempt to create a solidified method or curriculum of the Buddha's teachings. A great deal. But remember, the Abhidharma is written ages after the Buddha passed, hundreds of years. All the traditions say, no, the Buddha taught it. In fact, he taught it in heaven to his dead mother, and then he climbs down a golden staircase to earth to bring it to us. So, but it's a very ancient text. The Abhidharma was the text that really exemplified the Theravada tradition. They were the first ones to have it. And then now you can find it in all the traditions, including Tibetan Buddhism. It's part of the Buddhist Tibetan Buddhist canon. But yeah, the Abhidharma is kind of more modern style of philosophy, and that's what the school of Nalanda would have really been digging into. And yeah. Coffee. Have I worn you all out? You're all quiet. I thought we'd leave the mics open and we get some chatter. You guys are like church mice. That's a good thing. At least they're in church, right? Better than a bar mouse or yeah. Hey, you guys want to say our prayer and call it a teaching? We're at about 1 hour and 20. Oh, our altruistic prayer, one of my very favorites. May all be healthy, may all be prosperous, may all be well, may all be present, free of past regret and future worry. May all abide in constant appreciation, which is the source of great joy and contentment. May all realize their true nature and the true nature of reality, which is awakening, which you find through this practice. Oh, lovely. So we're going to do a question and answer tomorrow at the same time. If anybody, tonight you're going to have lots of questions. You can come back tomorrow and ask them, and hopefully I'll have a good answer for you. This teaching will be available later tonight online if anybody wants to review my jokes and put a smile on your face. Thanks everybody for coming. Last thing I always forget to talk about is that the teachings are free, but I'm a very, very poor monk. Any help at all would be definitely appreciated. I would love to have dinner tonight. And donations can be made on my website. I'm not lacking dinner, I'm just joking. But I am very poor, and I'm relocating to Istanbul at the end of the month, and a little nervous that I'm not going to have enough resources to do it effectively and safely with the coronavirus. So any help at all would be so appreciated. And yeah, so thanks everybody. Thanks for coming. You're wonderful. Bye-bye.